Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. On today's show, we are looking back at the victory over Fulham. Set Piece FC are at it again. It's another big 3 points. It's the best possible return after the international break in terms of the outcome, the result. 3 points is what we were all looking for. It was what we were all after. And this is the beginning of a run of games, remember, that we've all looked at and thought, this is a run that we really ought to take a hell of a lot of points from, if not maximum points. And so, you know, to come back after the international break with so much uncertainty, and there always is an uncertainty, by the way, when you return from an international break, because people come back in different conditions. People come back having spent the last week and a half working in a different way, working with different players, working under a different coach. And then you kind of got to plug everybody back in and hope that it all fits in exactly the same. And, you know, I think the performance wasn't amazing. Like, there was room for improvement for sure. But on an occasion like yesterday, the result was paramount and the performance is secondary for me. So I'm really, really pleased. And what we've done is we've piled a load of pressure onto Liverpool today. And I know we're like 8 games into the season. It sounds wild and crazy to be talking like this already, but we've put the pressure on Liverpool. Now, for what it's worth, I think Liverpool are going to hammer Manchester United later today. Manchester United are hopeless. If you were picking one of the big clubs to sort of try and take something off of Liverpool at Anfield, Manchester United would be my last pick, legitimately. Defensively, they're all over the place. Midfield, they've got nothing. Going forward, I mean, Benjamin Sesko's started to look a little bit better, but they're nowhere near where Manchester United have been in the past and essentially should be. So I'm not particularly hopeful that United will get anything today, but all we can do is do our job. All we can do is put pressure on Liverpool. And if they do slip up, then this could turn out to be a very, very positive weekend for us. If they don't, then it's still a good weekend because we've gone out there and we've got a result at a place that we hadn't won in our last 2 visits. So that's a good thing. But I do feel like, you know, there's a lot being made of this. If you think about it, last game we beat West Ham United, who had taken points at the Emirates off of us last season. And when we won that game, it was like, well, we've got over a bit of a kind of mental barrier and a hurdle here by getting this victory because it's a better result than the one we achieved against that same opposition in that same fixture the season before. And people said that about the Newcastle game as well. And I think the Newcastle one for me was probably more significant because A, it's a much tougher game playing away at Newcastle than playing at home to West Ham, with all due respect to them, but also because of the way that we did it, because of the way that we found a way of snatching the result when it looked like we were getting nothing, basically. You know, so yeah, I think that was much more significant, obviously. But I do feel like we're in danger a little bit of falling into a bit of a trap here because people keep saying, well, we're definitely going to be fine this year because we've beaten West Ham, who we couldn't beat last year, and we've beaten Newcastle, who we couldn't beat last year, and we've beaten Fulham, who we couldn't beat last year at the Cottage. I would argue, though, that the nature of this league means that anyone at any time can pop up and be your bogey team. And so this idea that, you know, we can be almost very, very confident at this stage, or that we can, you know, I don't want to say be arrogant because I know most of us aren't arrogant and aren't feeling that way. But this idea that, you know, we'll be fine because we're beating teams that we couldn't beat previously, it's a dangerous one. And it's a trap that you can fall into in this division because, as I say, anyone at any time can pop up and take points off you. Overall, on the display, I thought it was okay. As I said, I thought there was a couple of moments at the start of the game where we weren't quite at it. I didn't feel like the tempo was particularly good right at the start of the game. Gabriel had a couple of sloppy moments, didn't he? Playing balls out from the back, giving it away, got caught on a couple of occasions. I felt in the early exchanges, we were suffering a little bit from the fact that Riccardo Calafiori, was doing essentially what Riccardo Calafiori does, which is roam, which is drift, which is pop up in all sorts of awkward positions and areas, just because Fulham were clearly aware of that. And what you saw from them was you saw Raul Jimenez pulling out to that right-hand side, and you saw Harry Wilson being hit nice and early. And when he was coming down Fulham's right, Arsenal's left, what you had was a situation where Gabriel had to keep coming across. That means that someone like Rice has to then plug the hole left by him. The whole defense has to shift over, etc., etc. So while Calafiori's really effective going the other way, I think you saw the problems it can cause going the other way. Now, luckily, we were still able to kind of handle that, and we were able to manage those situations effectively enough. And, we've got those top individual defenders now. And I keep saying this, the fact that we have brilliant individuals does mean that at times we can kind of lean on, that sort of individual brilliance and say, yep, you know what, if you want to go roaming, if you want to go drifting, I suppose we can get away with it. We are taking a risk, but it's not as big a risk as it would be for other teams because of the quality of our defenders in isolation. Calafiori's disallowed goal. I mean, what a goal that was. What a finish. I think Charles Watts put something out on his X account where he said, can anyone remember a better disallowed goal scored by Arsenal than that one? And I've been racking my brain ever since I read that post. And off the top of my head, I can't think of any really. I say racking my brain since I read it. I mean, I read it about an hour ago. But it's been a question that I've been asking myself in my mind, and I can't quite put my finger on an answer. But the finish, sublime, and he's really, really unlucky. Really, really unlucky, isn't he, to be just sort of half a yard offside. But I was talking in the commentary up until that point about him at times, popping up like a second striker. It was almost like he was Victor Gyökeres's strike partner at points and at times. But yeah, fantastic finish. It's just a shame that it didn't count. I'll tell you who I thought struggled a little bit in the first half, not in terms of like he played terribly or anything, but just struggled to have the influence that you want him to have and that you hope he has. And that was Eberechi Eze for me. Let me know in the chat if you agree, disagree. I felt like the way Fulham set up with sort of Kearney and Sander Berg sort of playing as this two, and obviously King was a part of that as well, out of possession. I thought they did a really, really good job of shutting down those kind of central spaces. I thought they did a really, really good job of that. And I was looking at Eze, and again, it's something I said in my commentary. I felt like at times what I wanted to see from him was just a bit more willingness to kind of vacate that position. That's his position on paper, and say, do you know what? I'm going to go wide right and I'm going to get closer to Saka and I'm going to combine with Saka. Or do you know what? I'm going to go wide left and I'm going to combine with Leandro Trossard. I wanted to see him just vary up a little bit. And I didn't feel like we really got that from Eze. I think once in the second half, in the build up to a move, I think we eventually went on to win a corner from it. I saw him sort of drift into that right-sided half space, and then he played a ball, I think, through for Gyökeres. Angle was against him. He had his sort of effort charged down, I think, if I remember correctly. But that was an example of how just drifting out of that position and popping up somewhere in where there's a little bit more space, it will make your teammates, I think, more sort of keen to find you. Because I'd imagine there were a lot of times where Rice or Zubimendi would get on the ball, and obviously they want to work it into Eze, they want to work it into Saka, they want to work it out to the left-hand side where possible. But you're looking, and Fulham have done that shutdown job, and there's just no real pass on. And so Eze was, in my opinion, just in the shadows a little bit. And I don't want to see that from him, because I know he's a super talented player, and I know he can really influence the game if you can get him on the ball in the right areas. So room for improvement there. And I'm going to talk about him and that more specifically on the Patreon episode, which will be out around about half an hour after we finish up here. So if you are interested in getting access to additional content, go over to patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner, or you can click the QR code in the top corner of your screen if you're watching us on YouTube, and that will take you there to sign up. You get exclusive content, bonus content after every single match. Plus, you get every episode of the pod completely ad-free, and you become a part of our community where you can chat with us and all the other patrons, of course, in the chat feature. So check it out, patreon.com/the Chronicles of Aguna. The link is in the description below, as I say. Just on the Eze thing, AJ says he's more worried about Gyökeres. We'll come on to Gyökeres in a minute. Steve says, I think we missed Martin Odegaard. He's the glue that holds us together. We're going to miss Martin Odegaard. Like, regardless of what people have said or felt about his form in recent times, overall, we are going to miss him because he's a really, really talented player. And he does, I agree with you, Steve, knit things together and sort of create that cohesion and those connections within our team. So I completely agree with you on that. And I think this was the type of game that probably didn't suit Eze that much, but might have suited Martin Odegaard and what he brings to the table a little bit more. And we'll explain more on that in the Patreon episode, as I say, which will be out a little bit later on today. AJ says, I do think we need to see Odegaard and Eze together to really see what we could do. I think so. If that means Eze has to play from the left-hand side at times so that we can facilitate and accommodate that, then so be it. Because I think it's a really exciting prospect. But obviously, we haven't seen much of it just yet. D1997 says, I agree on Eze. He wasn't really in the game. I prefer him on the left because Trossard was poor besides the goal, was very wasteful. Trossard's got that in his locker, though, hasn't he? He's got that ability to pop up in the right place at the right time. And we'll talk about the goal a little bit later on. What else have I got in the chat box? Just rolling through on this. I'm just laughing at some of the comments, man. I'm just laughing at some of the stuff that you lot come up with in the live chat. Yeah, you go read it for yourselves. Anyway, so yeah, wanted to see a little bit more from Eze. And as I say, we'll talk about him on the Patreon piece. Let's talk a little bit about the start to the second half. I thought there was a lot more zip. I thought there was a lot more tempo from Arsenal. I thought that they were moving the ball that little bit quicker, and there was just a little bit more purpose about everything that we were doing. And obviously, on 58 minutes, just before the hour mark, the goal comes. And it's a typical Arsenal goal these days, isn't it? Bukayo Saka's delivery in towards the near post area. Gabby rises highest, quickest. He's the most powerful. And he flicks it on towards that far post. And it comes to Trossard, who I think finishes this really well. Like, I know people will look at it and they'll go, he's like 3 yards out, man. What are you sort of waxing lyrical about here? But if we break down that goal, right, it starts off with Saka's corner, which is a really good corner. Now, Saka, by his own admission, had put in some really poor corners in the earlier stages of this game. So it was nice to see one sort of finally landing on the money. Gabriel gets just the right amount of contact on it to be able to help the ball on, slightly change the direction of it, which obviously catches out the defense. That's why flick-ons can be so effective. But then Trossard, has to adjust himself at the far post, and he does that brilliantly. And I talk about Trossard in front of goal a lot, and I have done for many, many years. Since he first arrived at Arsenal, I've always said that Trossard in front of goal, he's as reliable as anyone that we have in the team. And I'd say that about him when he was at Brighton as well, because it's clearly one of his, I keep calling them superpowers recently, but it feels like it is for Leandro Trossard. He's very, very clutch. And that's a nice comment from Donald, who says, yes, if Trossard was a car part, it would be the clutch. Yeah, absolutely. But when the ball comes to him, right, a lot of players will try and completely adjust their body, try and take a step back, try and swivel so that they can try and volley it. Some would throw their head down at it in the hope that they can make a clean enough contact to see it go over the line. But Trossard's so composed, he doesn't snatch at opportunities like that. And when it comes his way, he just sort of adjusts, realizes very, very quickly that I can use my knee here. And he just sort of guides it into the goal. And no one was keeping that out. I think it was Jimenez who was back on the line. But as Joe puts in the chat, it's that coldness in front of goal that Leandro Trossard has that I really, really love. And that's a big, big goal, because you look at this Arsenal team nowadays and you look at how good and solid we are defensively. I mean, that was another game. That's 2 in a row now in which we've conceded 0 shots on target. 0. David Raya has not made a single save. So the defensive solidity It's there. And therefore, when you get your noses in front, you can feel pretty confident. You shouldn't feel complacent, and you shouldn't stop trying to go and get the second, I don't think. But, you can go about your business in the knowledge that, you should see this through, and it just allows you to relax. And people have said in the past that, we're really negative and we're really boring. And, I saw sort of a TalkSport video. I haven't actually watched it, to be fair, but I saw the thumbnail pop up, Rory Jennings saying we play like Stoke. I don't know if it was Rory Jennings or the caller, because you just never know with the way that TalkSport package things up. I've been on the receiving end of that myself. So you never really know. But you know what? You can call us Stoke. You can call us Bolton. You can call us Mark Hughes' Blackburn. You can call us whatever the hell you want. Ultimately, we're a really, really effective football team. And some managers build teams that are incredibly effective at the front end of the pitch and rely on the fact that they've got the firepower to get themselves out of holes and out of trouble. And that's a sort of an approach that we've seen quite a lot in the past. Some managers do it the other way around. And Mikel Arteta is one of those managers. And like it or lump it, his team are getting results. And so you can say whatever you like about us and the way that we play. I couldn't care less, because let me tell you this. And I had this conversation with a friend of mine yesterday. He texted me after the game and he goes, well done and all that. Like, it's a big result. He's not an Arsenal fan, by the way. And he goes, but you lot are a really tough watch. And I said, you know what? I don't care, because there's no way that I won't enjoy watching my team when they win. We win, I enjoy it. It's as simple as that. It's a very simple equation that does not need further complication. We win, I'm happy. I enjoy it. That's that. People only talk about negative and boring performances when they don't result in the outcome that you're after. That's the cold and brutal truth of it, So, yeah, we win, I'm happy, and that is that. Nothing else really needs to be said on the approach, in my opinion. The other kind of big moment in the game was when Arsenal had a penalty awarded to them by Anthony Taylor, only for the VAR to step in, force him over to the screen. Now, during the game and during the commentary, I was moaning about how long it was taking them to reach the decision. And I was moaning about the fact that, we keep saying clear and obvious is the kind of benchmark with regards to when VAR should step in and all the rest of it. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, well, if it's taking this long, it's not clear and obvious, is it? But I found out after the game that there were some technical issues, that the VAR at Stockley Park, they were struggling to get the pictures across to Anthony Taylor. And that was what the delay was. Anthony Taylor looks at it. He sees the bit of contact from the bottom of Kevin's studs and decides as a result of that to overturn his original decision. Now, I've got no problem with that contact being highlighted, because I don't really know how officials can win here. Because if they let that go and they say, look, it's minimal contact, it's not really enough of a contact. It's not a significant enough of a contact for me to overrule my decision. Like, it's not clear and obvious. Then there'll be people with the benefit of all of the replays and camera angles that we have these days that go, well, he's got to overturn that because there is contact. The problem is that they've set the precedent. You go back to our game at Newcastle just a few weeks ago, where again, we were awarded a penalty and again, it was overturned by the VAR because they'd found some contact. So you kind of set the precedent. And now, because of the way that we've micro-refereed and overanalyzed football matches for a number of years now since VAR's come into play, when you see that contact, you kind of almost have to do what Anthony Taylor did in the end. But my argument is not about whether Kevin got a touch on the ball or not, because I think he did. You can all see that. You can see that with the bottom of his boot, with the stud, whatever, he makes a contact, he grazes the ball, and it does slightly change the direction and the spin on the ball at least. But my argument here is that he fouls Bukayo Saka before he makes contact with the ball. And this was my argument about the Nick Pope thing as well. Nick Pope tripped Victor Gyökeres before Victor Gyökeres kicked the ball onto him. In this instance, it's very similar, because Kevin clashes knees with Bukayo Saka, which knocks the England and Arsenal star off of balance. And then with the follow through, makes contact on the ball. So what contact comes first? For me, the foul comes first. It's all good saying he got the ball, but if you come through the man to get the ball and you make contact and you destabilize the attacker the way that that's happened there, that's a foul. It's a foul. And the problem is that, we've got so much inconsistency, so many things sort of to consider and examples. You see a decision like that, right? And I don't know how you guys analyze it, but for me, I see a decision like that, and my first instinct is, okay, what can I think of that was similar? What was the outcome for that similar incident? And so surely that's what's going to be applied here. But I just don't know where to go with the analysis on these things anymore. I can only say what I saw. I can only put it from my perspective. And my perspective is that he fouls Bukayo Saka before he gets the ball. And listen, in the end, we go and get the result that we're after. And we go and get the result that we want. So not too much is going to be made of this. I suppose that's the way football goes. But we need some clarity, don't we? We need some clarity. Are we saying that as long as in the end you get some even minute touch on the ball, you can basically go through someone and it's absolutely fine? There needs to be some clarity around this, and we're just not getting it, unfortunately. A couple of other points I want to make and a couple of other players I want to talk about. But before we do that, just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're with us on YouTube. All of that stuff really, really does help. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review as well. That really, really does help. And if you'd like to go one further and become a patron, you can do so. Patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner. I want to touch on Victor Gyökeres's display and performance because, again, sort of going into the game, you'd have heard me on the preview pod saying there's nothing I'd like more than for Victor Gyökeres to be the man that wins it, because it just feels like there's a growing pressure around him to score goals. There's a growing pressure on him to do what essentially he was brought in to do, which is be that very, very sort of out and out and effective centre forward. I would argue yesterday that he was involved again and he was lively at times. He certainly put the work rate in. Like, whatever you want to say about the output right now, you can't deny the effort. The effort is clearly there. But obviously, when you pay what we've paid for Victor Gyökeres, you're not looking for just effort, are you? You're looking for a bit more. And so I totally acknowledge that and accept that there is going to be some criticism leveled at him. But I don't think we're at a point where we should start really doubting him. And I don't think we're at a point where we should start making a big deal of this and creating noise around him. We're Arsenal fans. It's our responsibility, I think, to protect our player, at least until we feel that that's no longer the right thing to do. And I certainly am not at that point. I'm not at that point where I'm going to sit here and throw Victor Gyökeres under a bus, because I think when you play centre forward against low blocks the way we do more often than not, you can be isolated at times. He had, I think, 3 attempts at goal yesterday, forced Bernd Leno into some saves. The XG was only 0.4. So that speaks to, and I'm talking about his individual XG, by the way. Victor Gyökeres' individual XG was 0.4. He had 3 attempts at goal. It was 0.4, which speaks to the angles from which some of those opportunities came, which speaks to the fact that they weren't easy chances. But there was one in the first half that he sort of hit. He tried to hit it low and back across the goal, and he sort of lifted it off the ground ever so slightly. And that made it an easier save for Bernd Leno in the end, who made a good save there in that case and on a couple of other occasions on the day. I saw some of the sort of coverage on Match of the Day last night, and I think they were saying, I think it was Alan Shearer who was saying that, and obviously he knows a thing or two about scoring goals, but he said something along the lines of, this is a guy who is just focused right now on hitting the target. Like, it gets into those positions and it's like, just get it on target. That's his kind of mindset. And that might be indicative of the fact that, what we're seeing right now is a frustrated Victor Gyökeres. A Victor Gyökeres who's doing a great job for the team, but knows that he needs to deliver more and desperately wants to deliver more. And what Alan Shearer was saying essentially is that if you get, the top strikers in the world game, your Harry Kanes and Robert Lewandowski's and people like that, it's not just about hitting the target. That's not what they're thinking in those scenarios and in those situations. And instead, they're thinking, right, bottom left-hand corner, kiss it in off the post. Top left-hand corner, right-hand corner. That maybe they're thinking more specifically, and having a greater confidence about you allows you to kind of see those pictures a little bit clearer, rather than sort of allowing the maybe the anxiety and the desperation to score a goal clouding over you and essentially impacting your vision and what you can see and what you're kind of envisaging moving forward. I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see. It's still relatively early days. But if I had one criticism of Victor Gyökeres yesterday, and this is something that I think when I now look back has been there for a while since he joined the club, certainly since he started playing Premier League games for the club. But it's something that I really, really noticed yesterday. So when we work the ball up to Victor Gyökeres, and I know you could argue Kai Havertz does this as well, but he obviously does it in a slightly different way. I feel like we've got this big, strong, powerful striker up front. And while we know that he is capable of that physical battle, and he's got a big frame and he's going to use it, and he's powerful and he's stocky and all the rest of it, I feel like he is overthinking the physical duels and overthinking the physical aspect of the game. Because I've seen Victor Gyökeres at times, and I saw it a couple of times yesterday, when the ball comes up long towards him, rather than focusing on getting into the right position first, and if you have to stand your ground or make a challenge or bump the centre half, you do it. I feel like he's thinking about bumping the centre half first and then trying to position himself. And sometimes when you do that, you can lose the flight of the ball. Sometimes when you do that, you just switch your concentration from, positioning to physical bump. You can end up just looking a little bit behind the action, like a little bit slower to react. And I feel like that's what I've seen from Victor Gyökeres. And looking back, I feel like I've seen it quite a bit since he's arrived at Arsenal. But yesterday, it really kind of stood out to me. I was co-commentating on the game, right? So I was sort of sitting a little bit more comfortably, a little bit sort of slouched in my seat and sort of taking it in because I wasn't having to speak throughout most of the game. So, I really did pick up on that yesterday. I felt like when the ball was coming over to him, his first thought was, right, I got to bump the centre half to try and give myself an advantage. When actually, if you think about your positioning first and you're ready and prepared to make that physical contact with the opponent, if that's what's necessary to hold your ground, I think that's two very, very different mindsets and two very, very different approaches. It sounds very subtle in terms of the differences, but I think, your focus should be on getting in the right place first. And once you've done that, if you need to then give someone a shoulder to shoulder, if you need to stand your ground, you do that. But I feel like he's trying to engage in the physical duel before he's even got the ball under control. And that shouldn't be your priority thought, in my personal opinion. But yeah, lively, involved, had a few shots at goal, which is more than we've seen in some other games, but still not quite there in terms of us maximizing him. And that's where we're just lacking a little bit. Look, we're going to take a really, really short break. And when we come back, we're going to take your questions on the other side of this. So get them into the live chat. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. If you haven't done so already, check us out on Patreon as well. Get involved in the comments. Get involved in the live chat. Stick your questions in. We've talked Eza, but we're going to focus on his display a little bit more in our Patreon piece coming up a little bit later on. We've talked the penalty decision, the goal. We've also touched on Victor Gyökeres and what might be the problem with Victor Gyökeres at the moment. I say problem as if I'm really frustrated and disappointed with him at the moment. That's not where I'm at. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm just looking at ways in which I think he could potentially improve. It's just my view. It's just my opinion. get those questions in. Let's work our way through some of them. In terms of the likes, there's no reason we shouldn't have 100 likes on the board, looking at how many of you are live with us on this Sunday morning. So please do support us with those likes. It really, really does help. But just to kind of summarize my thoughts on the game overall while I wait for a few of your questions to come through in the chat. The result was the most important thing. The performance was not bad, not as good as what we're capable of. Like, it wasn't comparable to the performance that we put up at St. James's Park, for example. But was the performance the most important thing yesterday? No, it wasn't. It was about getting that result. We've put another bad recent record to bed, which is obviously great for confidence. We've turned the heat up on Liverpool. And although people keep saying like we're Stoke and we're this and we're that, and we've sort of talked loads, haven't we, about the difficulties that we face at times when we come up against low blocks, having different ways of scoring goals. I mean, some people argue that set pieces is our main way of scoring goals, but having that ability to hurt teams in that way, it's a really good weapon to have. And I noticed there were a couple of instances where Arsenal were attacking in the first half, and there was one where Bukayo Saka sort of went to take Sessegnon on, I think, and the ball ricocheted off of Sessegnon. And Saka, if he really wanted to, could have kept the ball in play and gone again. And he thought, do you know what, just let it run out for a corner, because there is that belief and that confidence within the group that corners are as good a chance as any to hurt the opposition. And that's a pretty great place to be in that sense. Obviously, I want to see a bit more in open play. But I think in the sort of the circumstances that we find ourselves, where low blocks are the preferred method to go up against us, I think you need to have that set piece threat, because in those games where people are sitting behind the ball and camped on the edge of their box, they are going to make clearances. When you're trying to get in around the sides of teams rather than through the middle, because there's just simply no way through, you're going to force corners. So to be effective from them is really, really important. Paul says, why are VAR re-reffing every penalty decision we're getting? They're getting involved even when there is no clear and obvious error. Yeah, and we covered the decision a little bit earlier on the pod. I mentioned my thoughts on it. I felt like the contact was with Saka's knee before Kevin gets a touch on the ball. Therefore, it's a foul. But it does feel like, I think across the board, we're seeing forensic level analysis, and I don't want that. Because VAR was brought in to clear up the clear and obvious. The problem is that, once you let the sort of horse out of the traps, there's no way of bringing it back in. And that's the problem that the officials have got. Like, I don't think what happened yesterday was a scandal. And maybe my feeling is based on the fact that we won the game. So I'm not as frustrated by it or as disappointed by it. It's like the Gyökeres one up at Newcastle, right? Had we not won that game, you can bet that I would have gone much, much bigger on it in the kind of aftermath. I still made my feelings known, and I still made the point that I thought it was bad refereeing and a wrong call, and it was over involvement from the VAR. We saw that again yesterday, but I mean, can we say that at the very least they've shown some consistency across that 3-week period between when we played Newcastle and when we played Fulham? I don't agree with either of the decisions. It's consistently crap, but you get what I'm saying. Mackenzie says, do you think we pissed Arne Slot off because we scored from another set piece? I mean, Arne Slot's comments were interesting in the lead up to the weekend, because he talked about Liverpool conceding goals from set pieces. And then he said, but we're still very good from set pieces. And I thought, well, you're not right now. Set pieces are something that I think is becoming increasingly important in this game and in this league. It's a trend at the moment to be really sort of elaborate in your kind of set piece routines. And there's no one better than Arsenal at this moment in time in that department, you have to say. Paul James says, if every team we face puts up a low block, it's a compliment to how much we're feared. The problem is it won't make for an entertaining game. I said it earlier on. At the point that we're at in our development, where trophies and the big trophies are a must, I could not care less about the entertainment value. I don't think I could put up with it for like 5-6 seasons. But right now, I just want us to win And that's got to be the priority. And you do that whatever way you have to. And right now, clearly, as you say, we're facing low blocks and we're trying to obviously unlock them in the more conventional way. But when that doesn't work or when that doesn't happen, it's great to be able to reach into your back pocket and pull out a set piece routine that is effective. Steve says, who do you consider the biggest threat, City or Liverpool? Honestly, as far as I'm concerned, it's a 3-horse race at the moment. I know people keep saying, no, don't count City in that. Some people have written off Liverpool because they've had a rough 2 weeks. I'm not writing off any of them. They're both fantastic teams with fantastic coaches, stacked with fantastic players. And for Man City, people keep talking about their vulnerabilities and the fact that they're maybe not quite where they were a little while ago, and this a bit of a transition at the moment because they brought loads of players in last January and they brought more in the summer, and it's a new look Manchester City. But they've still got Erling Haaland, who cannot stop scoring, and they've still got Pep Guardiola. So as far as I'm concerned, they're in the race until they're not. Sugar says, at what point would you start panicking about Gyökeres? If he doesn't score between now and the international break, I'd play Mikel Merino, given how good he was last season as a 9. I'm not panicking about Victor Gyökeres now. If we get through this run of games up until the next international break and he doesn't score, then I'll start to say, yeah, that's maybe a little bit too long and we've got to have a conversation. But I'll tell you what this has done. I'll tell you what Victor Gyökeres coming in at centre forward with the record that he had and struggling to score for the last 8 games, I think it is. I'll tell you what it does. It highlights to a few people that probably needed it highlighting what a good player Kai Havertz is. Because I would argue that Kai Havertz struggled less. Now, that's not to say that Kai Havertz is the perfect number 9. I've never felt that. I've never said that. And obviously he does very different things. And I value what Gyökeres gives us because he's always looking to play off the shoulder, looking to spin in behind. Saw that on a couple of occasions again yesterday. And we've talked a lot about what that does for someone like Saka in terms of taking attention away from him. What it does for someone like Eze or Odegaard when playing in that position just off the striker. What it can do for the player playing on the wide left. It's clear that Victor Gyökeres brings value. And it's clear that when Kai Havertz plays, we've got something different at centre forward. But there were people sitting there going, Kai Havertz is rubbish. Victor Gyökeres will score 3 times the goals that he scored, blah, 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 blah. And it's just a little bit of a reality check, I think, for a lot of people that weren't analysing the game in the way I'd have analysed it. I'm not going to say you're wrong because you're entitled to your opinion. And I'm very much of the live and let live in terms of opinions phase right now. But yeah, I don't think I'd want to put Merino back up there, to be honest. But I think Kai Havertz's return is not a million miles away, and that's good news. It's really good news. Let's have a look. Lots of comments about the kind of the low block stuff and how we find a way around that. And I think, yeah, it's on Arteta and his staff and the players, by the way, to keep coming up with new ways, new tricks and new sort of plans in terms of trying to break those down. Odradek says, Harry, were the players a bit tired yesterday? Yeah, and that's why right at the start of the pod, I said, you know what? The result was the most important thing, not the scoreline, not the performance, because players are working incredibly hard with this horrendous schedule that footballers in general are faced with at the moment. I mean, the other day, for instance, we all sort of panicked, didn't we, at the fact that Martin Zubimendi wasn't pictured in training. And, Mikel Arteta sat down in the press conference on Friday and he said, look, he went away, he played 2 games, he's played loads of minutes at the start of this season, have to manage his load. And it feels to me like Mikel Arteta is, I don't know how to put this, but it feels to me like he's been scarred a little bit by what happened last season. The volume of injuries, but not just the volume of injuries, the severity of those injuries. It's led to him being really super hyper aware of what putting too much load on a player can do. And I would argue that he played his part in some of those injuries. Like Havertz was run into the ground. He was played in games that I don't think he needed to play in. It was the same with Saka. It was the same with Gabriel. And all three of those players suffered severe hamstring injuries last season. So I do think like the manager has to take some responsibility. And I think he won't ever come out and say it, but I think deep down, he knows that. Deep down, he knows that. I'm not saying he blames himself for the injuries, nor should he, but he knows that his actions and his decisions in some way, shape, or form will have contributed to the severity of those injuries. And I think he's so mindful of that now that he's trying to be more and more careful. And so you're seeing players miss training sessions when we've got quick turnarounds, and players miss training sessions after being away on international duty. And I think that's probably the way that it's going to have to go. We're very well drilled. This is not a new manager coming into a new club where he needs loads of time on the training ground. Actually saying to someone like Zubimendi, take the day off, saying to someone like Ben White, take the day off, is not going to impact our structure. It's not going to impact our overall ability to function as a team. So if you can do it, do it. If you can give them those breathers and give them those breaks, absolutely do it. What else have we got? Gary Reed says, if you play the low block game, you should expect to give away plenty of free kicks, throw-ins and corners, which Arsenal will obviously use to their advantage. Set piece, FC, ole ole. I love that. Love that. You know what? I'm going to, I'm going to respond to one more comment, and then I'm going to wrap up just because it's, that's about it. I haven't really got much to add on that game. It wasn't the most entertaining game. It wasn't a game that produced or threw up lots of talking points. There's a couple, and we've covered those off. But yeah, I don't want to drive you lot mad, and I want to get this Patreon piece recorded as well for you guys to take in. Arsenal Avenger just responding to my comments about Arteta being in part responsible for those injuries. He says it was not on Arteta. It was our poor recruitment strategy that left him short. Yeah, that's a part of it. I've talked about that many, many times over the last year or so. I never said that it was all on Arteta. I said that Arteta, in my opinion, played a part in that, and his role, I think, had an impact. So yeah, that's where I'm at on that. But thanks for your comment. Don't forget, if you haven't done so already and you're with us on YouTube, leave a like on the video. It really, really does help. Subscribe to the channel. If you are new, check us out on Patreon. There's a bonus piece of content coming your way within the next half an hour or so. There'll be a focus on Eberici Eza, so check that out. And I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful day. Up the Arsenal, back to the top of the pile. And guess what? Even if Liverpool win today, they can't remove us. Come on, United. Oh, that's a horrible sentence. Never thought I'd ever say, but needs must.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.